It's Divas That Care Radio. Stories, strategies, and ideas to inspire positive change. Welcome to Divas That Care, a network of women committed to making our world a better place for everyone. This is a global movement for women, by women, engaged in a collaborative effort to create a better world for future generations. To find out more about the movement, visit divasthatcare.com after the show. Right now, though, stay tuned for another jolt of inspiration.
We all seem to have that inner critic inside our heads. I have a committee, the itty-bitty shitty committee. You know what I mean, that nagging voice, or voices in my case, that knocks us down and drags us down the road of self-sabotage and self-neglect. A strong, positive sense of self-esteem is your first step to anything you wish to accomplish. Discover who you truly are, that gorgeous, talented, fabulous woman who deserves recognition and unconditional love. You know the most beautiful thing any woman can wear is confidence. Here on Confidence in Bloom with the Divas That Care Network, I, Tina Spolatini, speak with women living in their own self-confidence about who they truly are, how they found themselves, and how they care for themselves. Today I'm speaking with Allie Bird. Allie Bird is a widow, therapist, coach, speaker, and author of Grief Ally, helping people you love cope with death, loss, and grief. Since her husband's untimely death, Allie Bird has poured her heart into helping those who feel helpless during an unexpected crisis. She is on a mission to change the culture of grief. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you, Tina. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining me. So first off, I want to start with I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Me too.
You will tell us, the story. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with the purpose of your book?
Yeah. So when I was 30 years old, I was trucking along in life and doing pretty well, I thought. I was working as a coach. I was just starting to, dig my feet into the industry. And out of nowhere, my partner, my husband, the person that I had chose to spend the rest of my life with, died in an accident completely unexpectedly. And I was sent into the world of grief without any understanding of what it was like to live with a life-changing loss. But what I soon realized into my grief was that I was having an experience that was very different than what other bereaved people were describing. They were describing feeling left behind and misunderstood and abandoned, and the people around me were not doing that. My best friends and family stuck by me despite making mistakes. And it really, opened my eyes to the fact that, when somebody dies, there are so many people looking for the answers to what do I do and how do I help? And yet they have to mine the internet for suggestions. And even then, it's pretty limited to, go to the ceremony, whether that's a funeral or a celebration of life or some sort of, spiritual activity, send flowers, send food, and, don't disappear. But if you are someone's best friend, just sending food isn't going to be enough. So I took the lessons that my support network and I, used to navigate this world that none of us ever would have chosen to live in, and put those lessons into the book. And that's where I find myself now, is really on a mission to change the way we show up for bereaved people.
Oh, so you're more of, you're out to teach the people. Okay, so directly, let's just say, someone's loved ones. You're there to help the loved ones help the one who's lost the most. I mean, we've all lost, right?
Yes.
But, you're sort of being the person that you needed the help from.
Yeah, in some ways, yes. So the majority of the advocacy work that I do right now is with that specific population. And then I also have a private practice where I will work specifically with people who are really at the epicenter of a tragedy or, a death-related loss too.
Right. Oh, that sounds really interesting and like perfect timing. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into my own personal issues, but yeah, like I needed someone like that. Like I needed someone to help me because I never know what to say, right?
Yeah.
I want to help, but I don't, like, I could come and I can cook you a meal, or I can send you a meal, or I can send you a text and say, listen, I'm thinking of you, how's it going? But the truth is, as the one who's lost, like a parent or a spouse, you need more than that, right? You need someone to, like, feel the feels with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So the way I, see the world of grief work and the way I approach it is that, like, grief support is a team sport. There's a role for the clinician, the therapist, the doctor, but then there's also, like, some really big roles that people who are the friends of the family and that sort of thing that can step up and do more than just send, a casserole or a sympathy card.
Right. Yeah. Because, I mean, in the end, that's kind of an easy way out. Right?
Yeah, and I don't want to dismiss anyone's, intentions for, doing the best they can with the resources that they have. But I think there's a bit of a philosophy about grief support that's really missing in terms of, just saying, like, I'm so sorry for your loss, sending some food and some flowers, and then people are like, okay, like, wash their hands, being like, I've done the grief support thing.
Right.
And the reality is that
I've done my thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Grief is something that lasts forever. And people who, are feeling deep grief need support for much, much longer than what we offer socially in our culture right now. Right.
Right. And the thing is, I mean, in general, people don't like to talk about feelings. And so once they think that they've done their part, I've sent the meal, I've sent flowers, I went to the funeral, I can now forget about those feelings and move on with my life, because we all know life goes on, right? Mm-hmm. But we tend to forget that person who, like, I mean, we've all had a loss to some degree when that person dies, but the dependents of that person are going to suffer for a long time. They're not just going to end with the funeral and say, okay, life goes on, let's get moving.
You're so right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to kind of reconcile the absence of that one person and then all the losses that come with that person not being around anymore.
Wow. So you deal with those people that have, they want to do more than just send the flowers and the meal. You kind of help them to help more, right?
Exactly.
To be a better support system. And so how do you, like, where do you start with that? Like, someone comes to you and says, listen, I just lost my sister-in-law. She's got, her kids are in their 30s. How do I help them? How do I deal with that? Is that kind of how it works? Like, you start with them coming to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of that. It's also a bit of outreach on my part. I do a number of speaking events promoting the book and the lessons that I teach in the book. And then sometimes it's just as simple as having conversations with people after a talk and just kind of, giving them a little more guidance where they need it. Because I think what people, the big misconception about grief support is that one, that it can be like a one and done thing, but then further to that, if they're willing to, enter the space with this person who, is at the epicenter of the loss, that it's some sort of like really hard science to be there in that space. And, part of my work is really debunking that myth. And the reality is that anybody can be in a grief support role. And you don't have to there are a few skills that you should have, but anybody can be there in that space. What it takes is, a really strong practice of self-care and managing the feelings that come up for you. It takes being an active listener, and being able to listen without fixing anything. And then the third piece is just like relying on your own strengths and assets. So I tell people, if food is your thing, you are more than welcome to focus on food. But you might not be a food person, and you have so many other strengths that you could apply to supporting this person. Maybe you're really great with paperwork or attention to detail, or, you are a caregiver and willing to, take the kids for a bit, or maybe you are someone who, is very comfortable seeing someone's feelings, and you are the person that they can go to and with their big feelings when they're having them. So it's not, it's not rocket science.
Right, because we all have different, right, and we all have different, like you said, we all have different strengths, right?
Yeah.
Like person number one might be really great at, preparing food and wants to give the food, but then person number two might not enjoy the cooking, but might, rather sit and listen to them, listen to me cry, right? Like,
exactly.
I remember when my uncle passed away, he was very young, he was 42, and my grandma, of course, she took it obviously really hard because no mother wants to lose a child. And I remember, the family telling her to stop crying. And I used to think, why? Why would you tell her that? She needs to grieve, even if it is 5 years later, right? I mean, you never get over it. Am I right? You never really get over that pain.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's also another misconception, too, is, right, that there's some timeline, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you shouldn't feel anything anymore. And I think what I try and teach is that you're always going to feel something. Some days it might be gratitude or happiness with a certain memory, but there are other days where you're going to feel sad, you're going to feel lonely, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that, they are not managing their grief well. It doesn't mean that they need psychiatric help. It doesn't mean that they're depressed. It just means that this person who has died was someone that they cared about deeply, and they're always going to have feelings about that person. Right.
And it's, I mean, obviously it's going to be different with every situation, right? I mean, we all grieve differently, right? Just because you don't grieve for one person the same as the other, the third time around you might be a little bit easier or harder. It all depends on you in your life situation as well.
Absolutely. There's so many factors that can influence the ways that a person can and does grieve, right? And it's not exclusive to their own personality and biology. Life circumstances can also dictate, how much space someone has to feel their emotions, or whether they have to put their head down and power through to keep paying the rent, for example, or whether, it's culturally appropriate to cry in public spaces and that sort of thing. So yeah, you're completely on track there, that everyone's grief is different, and everyone's grief for every loss will be different.
Right. And just because they're not crying doesn't mean they're not hurting. Yeah, I've learned that.
Yes.
Yeah, I've learned that.
And I think too, people think that grief is, means the same thing as being sad, and it's not. So I like to say that, grief itself is not a feeling. Grief is just energy, and that can be expressed as any feeling on a feeling wheel. So some moments you might feel rage, and that's how you're expressing your grief. Other times you might be laughing uncontrollably, and that's an expression of your grief. So just because someone doesn't look sad or isn't crying all the time doesn't mean that they are not experiencing grief.
Right. Now, I remember, this has got to be 25 years ago. I remember someone that was close to us had passed away, and his wife was going through, she went through anger, she went through denial, she went through a little bit of depression. And I remember someone saying that there's seven stages of grief.
There's 5.
Have you ever heard of that before? Oh, 9. Okay, so can you tell me what those are? Well, 5. Okay. Yeah, maybe touch on those a little bit.
Yeah, so the way I'm going to touch on them is probably not the way you expect me to, and that is, like, they should be thrown away.
So they're not real anymore.
They are not real anymore, and in fact, they never should have been advertised as 5 stages of grief. So the 5 stages of grief was a model created by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who actually took the lessons from people who are dying and found themes, and that's where the 5 stages came from. So then she applied those 5 stages to grief, but it's never been scientifically proven, and it often does more harm than good because people think that, you know, I'll go through these 5 stages and it's a linear process, but if I go back to a stage at some point, then I've done grief wrong, or there's something wrong with me. When in fact, the 5 stages of grief, I think there's like denial, anger, acceptance, depression. I don't know what the other one is. It doesn't really matter. They're just a sample of things you can feel. You might go through the 5 stages of grief in a day, and you definitely won't do them linearly, and you're probably going to revisit them many, many times. And that's just the nature of grief. There's no universal laws when it comes to it, right? There are only common experiences.
Right. Okay. So that totally makes sense. Yeah. Like, I was, you know, like I was thinking with myself, like, I'm okay, so maybe I'm not normal because I didn't go through all this, right? Like I did go through it, but not in that order, number one, and not to the point where acceptance meant, okay, you know, she's gone, I'm over it. Right? Like,
yeah, and I don't think exactly. They're just setting people up to fail against some arbitrary, you know, words and descriptions. So I think the best advice that I can give anyone is toss it out. If you want to use like a tool, like the best thing you can do in terms of when it comes to feelings is get a feeling wheel and just be able to name them when you're having them. There's a lot of scientific evidence that says, you know, when you can name your emotions, they have less control over you. So that's what I advocate for, just being able to label it and say like, oh, I'm having this feeling, and then maybe explore a little bit about why. But that's the best utility you can have in terms of, you know, labeling where you are at any given moment.
Right. And that totally makes sense, right? I mean, like, you know, I've heard as a life coach myself, I know that when you're feeling something, it's okay to sit in that feeling, right? It's accept the feeling, allow it to go through you. You don't need to put any ownership on it. It's just right now it's here, but it will pass. Yes.
And I think that's a great reminder, you know, of all the feelings that come with grief. You know, people really struggle with the ones that are more uncomfortable. But the reality is that, feelings are finite, right? They move through you and then the next one comes. And nobody has ever woken up, you know, one morning, woken up happy and said like, oh no, I'm going to be happy forever, right? But that's often the mentality that we have when we're like, oh no, I'm sad today, I'm going to be sad forever. And you might be sadder for a longer period of time than you really ever have been in your life. But feelings don't stick around forever. They really don't. Yeah.
Wow. So now you were already a coach when this happened to you, when you had to learn this side of you. What kind of coaching do you do?
So before Will died, I was a life coach, and I was working with millennials to help them navigate big life transitions. So whether that was leaving a job, getting a new job, changing relationships, moving across the country, changing careers, that sort of thing. Yeah, and it's funny now, you know, looking back on it, I don't really believe in anything, you know, call it karma or what, but I was definitely learning a language of grief before I had a label for it. I remember, you know, one of my clients was leaving, you know, the career that she had trained for, and really wanted to, you know, switch into a different field that she was being called to switch to. And we held a funeral for her first career.
Oh my.
Yeah. it was playful, obviously, but like she was having some big feelings about it. I'm like, let's have a ceremony and like just recognize that this is, a crossing a threshold in your life, and we will celebrate it and honor it and acknowledge it as though, this is a death. And now I work with, life and death every day.
Wow. Isn't it funny, though, how the world always seems to bring you to where you need to be, right?
Yes. So strange.
Wow. That's so weird. So you speak on death. You speak on like the grieving and the dealing with loss. Do you deal generally more with people that are losing loved ones, or do you deal a lot still with people that they've lost their job, or they've moved to a different city and they've had to deal with all those transitions?
It's mostly death-related losses at this point. I fully acknowledge, though, that loss rarely is a singular experience. So the death of a person creates this kind of domino effect of all sorts of different losses. So the entry point that I usually come to work with people now is because of a death of someone that they had a significant relationship with. But with that can come, they might have to move. They might take on a career transition. There are all sorts of things that change in their life because this one person is, taken out of the ecosystem of how their day-to-day life works. So yes and no. To answer your question. The entry point is definitely death, but there is a lot of change and navigating transitions that comes when you experience the death of someone close to you.
Right. I could see that, because you're dealing with, like, okay, so my partner has now passed away. I can't live in this house by myself, so I need to move to a smaller place. And there's a lot more. It's not just about my partner now. It's also about, I raised my kids in that house, and this happened in that house, and that happened. Yeah, you're dealing with the grief of all those things now, too. That must make it very difficult. Like, you need to be, I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like for you to sit through an hour or two with the client who is dealing with all that to stay strong. Like, it must drain your energy in a large way.
Tina, I get that a lot, and people ask me, how do I keep myself from like going down the rabbit hole? But from my own lived experience, like these are the conversations that I feel are worthy of my time. Like, the world I want to live in is a world where these conversations like happen out in the open, and we don't have to go seek out, professional support to have conversations about how tough life gets when we lose somebody that we love. And so I see it, it probably sounds weird, but I feel quite energized, like, being in those moments and being able to offer someone the validation to know that, you are not crazy, you are not doing this wrong, and, you are doing the best you can in a world that is incredibly grief illiterate and completely death adverse. And I feel very privileged and honored to be the person who tells them that, it's okay that they're not okay right now.
Yes, I could see that.
And but I do right? have exactly. I do have a very, strong self-care practice.
That's my next question. I would love to know what that is.
I'll start with, it starts with sleep. I am really focused on making sure that I get enough sleep. And when I don't get enough sleep, it is incredibly obvious. Like, my emotional state changes quite significantly. So I start there. I have a dog who is the best dog in the world. Her name is Renegade. She's a Sheepadoodle, and her presence is just the sweetest, loveliest gift for me every day. She lays on my chest when I'm anxious. We go for walks, and she makes me laugh. It's really wonderful. I have a wonderful relationship with garbage TV. So I will, use that tool sometimes. I love yoga and also singing. So I can't go a day without the ability to sing out loud, whether it's in the shower, whether it's in the car, whether it's, in the house when nobody else is at home. It's really important for me to be able to sing every day. And then on top of that, I have a wonderful support network of, after Will died, I really had to, do a survey of the people in my life and say like, hey, I'm going to need you a lot more than when Will was alive. And they have really stepped up in the most incredible ways. So I have a number of people, if I am having a down day and I need someone to talk to, there is always somebody who's going to pick up my call. And I am really, really grateful for that.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's something that, I think we all need that, like in general, without going through grief, right?
Yes.
You need to have that friend that you can call at, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and they're going to pick up.
Yes.
But when you're dealing with grief, right, that you need, because I would think, and I haven't been this close to it, there's lots of things that go through your brain. And sometimes I would think it's easier to say to yourself, I don't need to be here without this person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I'm sure
you're
like that
spot on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, the thing that stopped me from, acting on any sort of, suicidal ideation is that I didn't want anybody else to have to feel the pain that I was feeling, because I knew that there were so many people in the world that loved me who would have been heartbroken, like absolutely catastrophically heartbroken. And I would describe that as the way that I, felt when Will died. I didn't want anybody else in my life to feel that pain. And truthfully, like that's what kept me alive. I think. And, I think that really speaks to the, the caliber of the friendships that I have as well. To know that, I am so close with so many people that me leaving this world would be catastrophic.
Right.
And maybe that's, over, I don't want to sound like have some sort of like self-inflated personality, but yeah, it was my way of like, I'm managing the pain of others by sticking around.
Right. Well, I don't think that sounds like self-centered or selfish, because, let's face it, we all have someone, right? Like, yeah. I know, it's one thing when you lose a parent, but when a parent loses a child, right, it's terrible. Like, nobody wants to lose anyone, right? We don't sit there and make a list of, well, I'm okay if this person dies, but, it's not okay if that person dies. It doesn't work that way. We don't have that choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that nobody would make that list. But parents do not want to lose their children before them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so that, if you still have parents on this earth, right, then that's one person that's enough, right?
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to see my parents suffer, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. And to speak to my loss, like that, like, a parent losing a child is horrid, but you also, you don't choose to spend the rest of your life with someone with the intention that you're going to see them die. Right.
Right.
So like the moment that you're describing about like all the other people I would choose to die, like those thoughts like went through my head too about like, why Will? why me?
Right.
Because I could have chosen, it could have made you a list of all the other people I would have chosen to die besides him.
Right.
But he was the one who did. Yeah.
Right. But the reality is you do that out of like pity for yourself, right? You're doing that. Like, why couldn't you take that person? Because I need him, right? That person, you know, I don't need that person as much, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. But the reality is you really wouldn't ask for that person to be gone.
No.
Right? You were just
absolutely
in
not.
that little bit of insanity at the moment, right? When you're grief stricken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I understand that 100%. Yeah, I really understand that. Yeah. So I want to talk more about your book. You said it's stories like that you sort of come across. Am I right? Is that how I understood it properly? Like it's not like this is the steps that you have to do. Oh, it is. It's more like a lesson. Okay.
Yes. So the book is set up, each chapter builds on one another, and it teaches you kind of like the fundamental like steps and mindset that anyone who is in a grief support role should have.
Okay. Well, this sounds super interesting because it's like, I think everybody needs to know this.
I completely agree with you, Tina.
Yeah, like I mean, none of us know how we're going to handle grief, and none of us know how to support and help someone who is grieving. So I'm looking in. I'm going to get this book. Where can I buy it?
On anywhere you buy books commercially. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Chapters, Indigo, Audible, Apple Books, Google Books, all of that. If you want to purchase it from an independent bookstore, they can also order it for you.
Perfect. Yeah, it just sounds so I mean, I don't want to be intrigued, I'll be honest, right? But at the same time, it's a tool that we could all have in our pocket because we don't know when we're going to need it, right?
I completely agree.
Yeah. Yeah,
I advocate that it's something that, yes, it's something that everybody, I think, should have on their bookshelf. So when the time comes, and you do never know when that time is going to come, you will need it eventually, and then you will have it. And it kind of just, it's a bit of a roadmap, and it gives people more guidance than, make a casserole, make it something that's freezable, and, drop it off with a card. And, part of the reason that I wrote the book, and a lot of people assumed when I said that I was going to write a book, they thought that, it would be a memoir and that it would be, the ins and outs of my experience with grief. But there's already so many memoirs out there, and they are all beautifully written, but they are more written for the people who are like me, who are at the epicenter of something, tragic, losing a loved one. And when someone dies, so for me, for example, like I was in shock probably for about 6 weeks before I really started to feel any feelings related to Will's death. Like I obviously I felt things, in those 6 weeks, but it was the significance of his loss, the weight of it, it really hit me about 6 weeks after he died. But in those 6 weeks, like, there were so many people who came to me and they're like, please let me know if I can do anything. Like, I remember, my best friends lived on the other side of the country at the time, and they sent me a basket of like crackers and cheese and grapes and things. And they sent me it like 2-3 days after Will died. And then, we had the funeral, we did the ceremony things, and then I, went home to sleep in our house. And I remember there was a conversation between the two of them that they told me about later, and they were like, should we send another basket? And I responded to them being like, no, I don't need any more like crackers and cheese right now. But that was like the narrative, right? Like, that's the story that we were showed growing up, is that, you you send some food and you go to the funeral and then that's it. But they're like, we love you so much and we see the pain that you're in. We don't know what to do now. And so my hope with the book is that, the people who are really looking for the answers to what do I do? How do I help? How do I not make this worse? Can pick up a copy, and it will give them more agency and confidence in how they're going to support this person that they care about through the long haul of their grief.
I'm kind of overwhelmed with the whole idea of the fact that someone thought about this. Right? Because like you said, our society is not like that. And so for someone to finally go, okay, we need to help these people. I mean, the person that is grieving, they're grieving. Like, they're going to get one way or another without them even realizing it. But to be able to be the one that gives that help, right, is just, I think that we all want to do that for someone.
Yeah.
Right?
And I honestly think that's, being there to support someone who's going through a really hard time is one of the most important roles that we could ever take on as human beings, right? We could be parents and we can be support people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it comes down to, right? Like seeing the people that we love through the most challenging parts of being human.
Right. So when I could just imagine, like, when you're helping, someone who's grieving and their, family and friends come around, when, I don't know if you ever are in that situation where, like, you're with them, you probably hear a lot, time will heal, right? I mean, do you correct them? Because, let's face it, time doesn't heal anything, right? You need to heal it. You need to be able to let certain feelings go.
Yeah, I pick my battles.
Right.
There's a great chapter in the book called Poetry, Cliches, and Nonsense, and it really captures some of the terrible cliches that people use when we talk about grief. Time heals all wounds, or they wouldn't want you to feel this way, or you're so strong. And they get thrown around, I think, because people are just kind of fumbling over their words. But I think the best thing that you can do is really just be honest. And that is, sometimes that, like, this is really bad. Like, this is a really shitty situation. And I am so sorry that you are in this. And I am so sorry that, often it's better than the cliche, right? Like, and often, I think people enter a grief support space with the goal of making the person feel better. And you're already setting yourself up for failure if that's your mindset. Your intention when you enter a space should simply be to be present there, to bear witness and be willing to accept your person in whatever state they are in. Because that's what grieving people need. They need to be validated that, the feelings, the experience that they're having because this person who they cared about died, like, is okay, that they are allowed to be this overcome with emotion. And part of that is because they had such a significant relationship with them, right? But when we deny people the space to witness those emotions, like, that's when they get stuck. And it's not the person's fault. It's the people around them who aren't giving them the space that their grief is worthy of.
Right.
And I think that's really where we go wrong in our culture right now.
Right. Well, our culture has a lot of these kinds of little,
Sure does.
Right? But like I said, the fact that there's somebody who is willing to open up that, that window or that story so that people can be more, because I don't think we do it on purpose. We don't know what to say. People in general do not like to talk about feelings or know someone else's feelings because they don't know what to do with it. right? I think this
Yes.
is more of an opportunity for them to say, okay, so even though I don't know what to say or I don't know what to do, if all I have to do is listen and let them know that I'm here to help if they need it, if that's all I have to do, that's good, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not anything crazy. You don't have to be wildly skilled. You just have to be able to sit in a space with
Right.
someone and maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable for a little while.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. I just love it. I'm going to get your book today. Oh, my goodness.
No, thank you.
If there was one thing you could say to our listeners on this topic of, being the support for someone grieving, what would that be?
Yeah, my best lesson and advice to people when, they're going to be taking on a grief support role is toss out any idea that you have that you can fix this. Like, you should not be around to problem solve unless someone is asking for your help to problem solve. What I advocate for is doing what you can to make this person's life easier and more comfortable. And when you use those two factors in your approach, you are setting yourself up for success, and you're going to be much more helpful to the person who you care about.
Thank you so much. Now, if anyone wants to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Yeah, you can go to my website. My website is allibird.com, or you can find me on social media at the Allie Bird. Thank
you so much for joining me. And I'm so grateful to have learned this from you today. And I know that, there's a few tools in my pocket already just from this little chat that we've had, but your book will give me much more. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tina. This was really wonderful. I appreciate it a lot.
Awesome. Thank you. Confidence in Bloom is a celebration of self-love, a confirmation that you're an amazing, desirable, brilliant, gorgeous, talented woman, even though you may not look like a screen star or a supermodel. The truth is, they don't even look like that. We offer unconditional love to our partners, our children, our extended family, even our pets. It's high time we got out of our own way and learned to unconditionally love ourselves. Chic definitely does come in every shape, so if you want something to believe, start with yourself. If you'd like to be a guest here on Confidence in Bloom and chat with me, contact me through Instagram at infobloomstyling or by email at tina@infobloomstyling.com or through the Divas That Care website.
Thanks for listening. This show was brought to you by Divas That Care. Connect with us on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course on divasthatcare.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss a thing.